A brutal attack on a defenceless young woman.
Any eyewitness to that is likely to think this is potentially a terror attack.
A prime suspect with a troubling history of obsessive behaviour.
This was somebody that couldn't take no for an answer, and there were some really dangerous warning signs.
And a family left devastated by a moment of horrific violence.
He opened her door, her car door of a little Citroen, and hacked her to death.
This murder town is Chatham. Killers are unpredictable. They can attack anyone at any time. Their motives are often varied, and chillingly, in a number of cases, their reason to kill is completely unknown. Some can be organised and planned with meticulous efficiency, whilst others are more opportunistic. They live amongst us in our towns and cities, and one thing sets them apart from the rest of society: their terrifying capacity to kill. Welcome to Murdertown.
Do you feel it in the air? Everything is changing, a world wasted by fear. Something wicked this way comes, something wicked this way comes. It's been around since time began, a million times around our sun. Something wicked this way comes, something wicked this way comes.
This is the market town of Chatham, located in the county of Kent. Once home to a young Charles Dickens, it sits on the banks of the River Medway and has a population of just over 80,000 people. Throughout its history, it's been a proud and prominent location for shipbuilding. And while that industry has now declined, the dockyard buildings remain, preserved as an historic site.
Chatham is a picturesque town in Kent. It's a maritime town. It's got quite a rich military history. It was built around the army barracks and the dockyard. It's one of the bigger towns in Kent, and it's one of the more deprived areas as well. But there's, a strong sense of community there. People tend to know their neighbours. People tend to kind of look out for each other. Chatham has one of the highest crime rates in Kent, and that does unfortunately seem to be getting worse year on year. That said, people do generally feel safe there. People that live there do feel safe. You certainly wouldn't expect violent crime to occur. So when it does, it's, particularly shocking.
But for the community of Chatham, that all changed at 11:03 on a busy Thursday morning at the Dockside Outlet Shopping Centre, when police were called to this car park to attend an incident.
One passerby had called the police. They arrived very quickly to the scene. A passerby saw what was happening. I don't think he realised what was going on. He thought that maybe he was looking at a fight or something.
When a call of this nature comes in, having a frenzied attack like that in such a public place in broad daylight is extremely rare. But I think as a police officer, what's going through your mind is, who is responsible and what is the motive? Am I going to a terror attack where potentially other people are going to be harmed? And you've also got an offender who is walking around, potentially still armed, And so you need to deal with that and take control of that offender and make sure that they don't harm themselves or anyone else that's in that area. Is the victim still alive? Can the victim be saved? And so a whole host of things will be going through your mind as to what you're going to be faced with when you arrive at that crime scene.
The attacker, he made himself known to the police straight away. He was completely emotionless. He was very blank, and he walked over to the police and said, "You want me?"
In this busy Kent shopping centre car park, confusion was rife. The images of a man covered in blood had echoes of the London Bridge terror attack that had taken place less than 4 weeks earlier.
Any eyewitness to that is likely to think this is potentially a terror attack because of what they've seen on the news more recently. Fear is heightened as a result of that. As a police officer, you don't know what the motive is until you get there, until you start investigating it. And so you keep an open mind when you go into that incident.
It quickly became apparent that this was a very different type of crime, however. There was only one victim, a young woman who'd been attacked in her car, and the assault was far from random.
When we look at how the actual killing unfolded, he didn't even make an attempt to try and hide what he was doing. He did it in public, in front of many witnesses. So to me, this suggests somebody that was completely blinkered by this absolute rage. At the time, he wasn't thinking about the consequences of his actions. He didn't care whether he would be caught or not. This is somebody who's acted so impulsively, they've not even had the forethought of what would happen next.
It was, a frenzied attack. She tried to fight him off and she was shouting for help. She was beeping her horn. She did attract the attention of witnesses. A few people saw what was happening. I mean, she didn't stand a chance, really. They put a defibrillator on her chest. A paramedic arrived shortly afterwards, but there was nothing that they could have done for her.
In a matter of minutes, a reported incident in a busy shopping centre car park had become a murder. The 23-year-old woman found in the car had been stabbed a staggering 75 times. Her name was Molly McLaren. But who was the man covered in blood, surrendering himself to the police? And exactly what was the motive that had led to this brutal and frenzied murder?
He was posting on Facebook. He was saying that she was using drugs.
He didn't give a monkeys about what he was doing, what he was saying. And poor Molly was she was petrified.
On the 29th of June 2017, the town of Chatham was the location for a horrific crime. A young girl was brutally stabbed to death in her car. On arriving at the scene, the police apprehended a male individual who was covered in blood. They quickly set about establishing if he was responsible for this appalling crime.
She did cry for help and she beeped her horn to kind of get the attention of passers-by. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. I think they thought it maybe was a fight at first, but then it became obvious that she was losing a lot of blood and she was getting weaker very quickly. There was a passerby. He saw the whole thing happen. He was walking his dog. He tried to intervene and help. He tried to shut his leg in the car door, kind of last-ditch attempt just to, even just to distract him. But he was very focused on what he was doing. He was calm, quite blank almost. He had 2 knives and a pickaxe, and he stabbed her 75 times in the neck and the head. Her injuries were horrific. There was nothing that they could have done. She died at the scene within minutes of the attack.
The witness statements left the police in little doubt as to who was responsible for the attack. And they'd also been able to establish the name of the victim who'd been visiting the local gym that day. 23-year-old Molly McLaren.
My name's Jo McLaren and I'm the mum of Molly McLaren. She was a ray of sunshine, a people person, always there for others if they needed her. She always wanted to help others. She had so many friends, but different pockets of friends. She was like a magnet. People wanted to be around her. We were very close. First of all, I'm her mum, but secondly, best friends. We would do so much together. We would have retail therapy together, go for lunches, and we just loved each other to bits.
She was an amazing girl. She would help anybody. We were so proud of her. She could walk into a room and just light it up and everyone wanted to say hello and make friends. She was just such a gregarious person.
For Molly, a weekend would be sharing food, drink with family and friends, seeing as many friends throughout the week as she possibly could, and then going out, having fun, festivals. That was her thing. She loved a music festival and she would go to as many that she could A, get tickets for and B, could afford.
Molly grew up here, on this street in Cobham, in a loving family home. But sadly, as a teenager, she experienced problems with an eating disorder.
I believe Molly had been suffering with bulimia for about 6 to 9 months. And you'd never have known. It's one of these things, they can hide it so well. She'd always eat with us, and she'd always spend time with us after. It's not like she would disappear suddenly. But when she told us, we decided that I'd go with her to the doctor. But unfortunately, NHS counselling is just not specialised enough. She felt like she was wasting their time when they could be helping others. So she gave up on that and dug deep. She said, I can do this, Mum, I can do this. Well, all the women on my side of the family were very strong. And I thought, if anyone can do it, you can do it. And Molly did it and conquered it herself. She was such a strong person.
Molly had put her problems behind her, and she was working towards a degree at the University of Kent with ambitions to become a fitness instructor.
Molly's confidence grew so much when she started university because she was doing something she was passionate about.
She was a natural academic. She was just a completely natural sponge for knowledge. She went there with her determination to succeed, which was always her way.
She studied nutrition, which at first I thought was not a good idea because I thought that would give her ammunition for the bulimia to take hold again. But in fact, it had the opposite effect. She learned so much about nutrition. She said, this is just the thing that I need to help me, to help others.
Like many of her age group, Molly was also keen to find a relationship and had signed up to a popular dating app.
Molly went onto a dating app because a lot of her friends were doing it. She went on a few dates. No, none of them really lasted very long, and I don't think she was actually ever in love, but she enjoyed male company.
In July 2016, Molly started messaging a young man called Joshua Stimpson, who lived in nearby Waltham. The pair used social media to communicate for a number of months. Then in November 2016, they finally decided to meet up.
One day, Molly came and sat with me in the front room. She said, Mum, I think I've met someone online, and they think they were going to meet up. If Molly chose someone to be her boyfriend, I had enough confidence in Molly that whoever she chose would be right. The only reservation I had was when Molly said, "Mum, I need to tell you that he suffers with bipolar." And as she said that, I had a sharp intake of breath, and immediately she was at me and she said, "Please, Mum, don't be like that, don't take that course of action."
We thought, oh no. Does she really need that on top of all the other things?
And I said, "Well, do you really think you need this in your life?" And she said, "I think we could probably both help each other."
You know, we just let it go. And all of a sudden, he was there.
When he first came round and I met him, he just seemed very normal. His mum and dad had split up when he was quite young, and he lived with his dad and his stepmum, and that thought just didn't enter my mind anymore. He didn't seem to have ups and downs. He was making Molly happy, and to see Molly happy was enough for me.
He came across as a fairly normal guy in some respects. He used to come round here, we had a beer, talk about football, blah, 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 as men do.
He'd have meals with us, he'd stay. Most weekends he'd come and stay.
Initially, it seemed like Molly might have found a relationship that had potential. However, it wasn't long before Molly's parents noticed that cracks were starting to appear.
Molly would take him out and introduce her to all her friends, but he never introduced her to any of his friends.
And the next thing we know, he's given up his job. And then he's round here, just sitting on the sofa. And I thought, what the... He said he played football every Sunday, but when we suggested that we all go down and watch him play, he went, "No, you can't do that," which we thought, you know, was strange.
I said, why won't he let? And she said, he said that he doesn't want all his friends ogling her.
On the 17th of June 2017, around 6 months after they'd started dating, Molly took control of the situation and decided to end her relationship with Joshua Stimpson.
Molly's birthday was towards the end of May. She had a few things she was going to with her friends and family, one of which was a beer festival in Maidstone. Molly had come home, and when she got up, she said, "I finished with Josh." She said, "It wasn't planned, Mum." She said, "But he was just so miserable, and what we've been through lately, I just suddenly thought, can't do it anymore." It was a bit quiet for a couple of days, and then Molly said, "Oh, he was just relentless in texting her and calling her." She said, "But I'm not giving in this time." She said, "I'm going to be strong." And she was upset, don't get me wrong, she was upset. She didn't like treating someone like that, but she couldn't put up with the kind of person he was turning into.
Joshua didn't take the rejection well, and this quickly manifested in the form of a social media campaign against Molly.
He was posting on Facebook, he was saying that she was using drugs. He was posting their private messages on there. He was trying to embarrass her, essentially.
And it was just completely derogatory. He didn't give a monkeys about what he was doing, what he was saying. And poor Molly was just, she was petrified.
He posted claiming that Molly had dabbled with cocaine, and that was kind of the final straw. She decided to print off all of the posts and the messages, and she and her mum went to Kent Police Station on June 22nd, 2017.
With the police now involved and calling Joshua Stimpson in for an interview, Molly hoped this would be enough to scare her ex-boyfriend into stopping his campaign against her.
He was just so blasé and showed absolutely no respect for the police. He just kept saying, I've done nothing wrong. And in the end, they said, look, if you continue doing this, we will have to arrest you. And one of his parting sentences, I'll always remember, was said, you've seen nothing yet.
In June 2017, 23-year-old student Molly McLaren was stabbed to death in this car park in broad daylight, surrounded by shoppers. Molly had recently broken up with her boyfriend, Joshua Stimpson, a 26-year-old warehouse worker, following his erratic and controlling behaviour, which then led to him starting a disturbing social media campaign against her. Crucially, this wasn't the first time that Stimpson had exhibited this sort of behaviour. Unbeknownst to Molly, Stimpson's previous relationships had followed a terrifyingly similar pattern.
He had a tendency to tell his girlfriends that they weren't allowed to speak to other men. He was incredibly controlling and manipulative. One ex-girlfriend had told him not to contact her, and she went on to receive 25 missed calls from him. He threatened to drown one of his ex-girlfriends. She said that he'd actually slashed her tyres. So this was somebody that couldn't take no for an answer, and there were some really dangerous warning signs.
My name's Dr. Shaham Das. I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist. The basis of my job is assessing or rehabilitating people who have a mental illness or are suspected of having a mental illness, who've committed fairly serious offences. When we look at Stimpson's personality, the thing that really stands out to me is his obsessive nature, his need to dominate and control, and his proclivity to threaten his partners. Not just in his relationship with Molly, but he reportedly had a similar pattern of behaviour in previous relationships. In his mind, he idealises what he thinks is the correct version of the relationship. So in his mind, they're both madly in love and they need to spend all their time together. But of course, what he doesn't appreciate is that he might stifle the other person and actually push them away. So to me, this shows a pattern of somebody who's deeply insecure, gets very easily jealous. And because he's got such deep-rooted insecurities, it's likely that this pattern will continue indefinitely. Often there's something in the individual's childhood or adolescence that has triggered that. From what we know about Stimpson, we know that his parents separated when he was a child, and we know that he felt abandoned to a degree by his mother, so I wonder if that built into a huge inferiority complex.
Joshua Stimpson exhibited all the signs of an extremely obsessive personality, and there was a real danger that his obsessions could lead to violence.
Many people can be obsessed within a relationship, but only a small proportion of those people will actually physically do something about it, which is when the controlling behaviour comes in. And there's a whole range of ways to be controlling. It can be through passive threats, it can be through actual actions such as following their partners, looking at their phone, controlling their finances. So that's a different step, I would say. That's a further step into this quite dark behaviour.
In June 2017, 6 months after they'd started dating, Molly had had enough of Joshua Stimpson's obsessive and controlling behaviour. She'd ended their relationship and even involved the police after presenting evidence of Stimpson's social media campaign against her.
Her friends and family were really worried about him tracking her, but she got a phone call that night from the police to say that he had agreed to take down his posts about her. He'd said that it was because he didn't want his work clients to think badly of him, so it was very much self-motivated.
By the 29th of June, Molly McLaren was trying to put the toxic relationship with Joshua Stimpson behind her. She had her studies to look forward to, and it was just another normal Thursday morning.
She would have woken up about 8:30, got up, had breakfast. Doug was away, and she came into me. She said, right, I'm off to the gym. So I said, OK, you go off to the gym. And what time do you think you'll be back? So she said, oh, probably about after between 11, half 11. So we did our little ritual of love you more, love you mostest. And that was the last thing I said to her.
Just after 10 a.m, she arrives at her gym. She walks in and she sees Joshua there. It was pretty empty, the gym. He could have gone anywhere. There weren't many people around. And he came up and started training right next to her. She approached him and asked him if he was following her. And this is caught on CCTV. It's not clear what he said back to her. She was obviously aware that she was being stalked at this point, that it wasn't just a coincidence. So she started working out. She took a picture of him and she sent it to her friend and one to her mum as well, and explained that he'd come and started training right next to her.
I just got a text from her and saying, Mum, he's turned up at the gym. He's working out right next to me. And I thought, A, why isn't he at work? That's not even the gym I think that he goes to. And I just texted her straight back. So I said, right, don't talk to him, ignore him, just get up and come home. And I wish I'd never said that. I wish I'd said to her, just get up and go and be amongst other people. She said, yeah, I'm leaving now. It would take Molly 20 minutes tops to drive back from the gym. After, I think, half an hour had gone, her car wasn't here. So I texted her and I said, where are you? And then I thought, oh, you silly thing. She's not going to text back, she's driving.
He left. She stayed there a little bit longer. Molly left the gym. She went and got into her car and she was just about to drive away.
One of her really good friends texted me and said, have you heard from Molly? So I said, no. So she said, we were on a group chat and suddenly Molly's not responding. She said, and I've just heard there's an incident at Chatham Dockside. Someone's been stabbed. I went, oh my God, that's Molly.
She didn't realise that he had actually been waiting in his car with 2 knives and a pickaxe. He walked over to her car.
And then he opened her door, her car door of a little Citroen, and hacked her to death.
He stabbed her 75 times. She would have died within minutes. She couldn't have survived the 30th injury. That's how long he continued for after she was gone.
The reason why there were so many injuries was because he was making the statement, I'm going to make sure that you can never come back from this. And also, by the way, I'm going to punish your family while we're here as well because they weren't on my side against you. So to you know, literally dismember their lovely, beautiful daughter is also punishment to them. But it's making a statement to the world. He would have been in a frenzy. He would have been in a rage. You know, the rage would have been building up and it would have been, right, OK, I've done it once, so I'm just going to keep doing it until somebody stops me. Narcissists don't often think about the consequences of their actions. Their actions are 100% at that time that they're dedicated to, and the consequences of that they can't think about. He wouldn't have thought, oh, what does it matter to my family? He wouldn't have thought that. It would have just been, I've got to carry out this at the time because it'll make me feel better about myself.
I was on a drill ship offshore, 100 miles offshore Senegal, offshore Dhaka. I got an email from Joanne, said, give me a call straight away. And I thought, what's this? And I thought it might have been related to our brother-in-law, who's quite elderly and a little bit frail. So I didn't think too much more of it. And then I went upstairs to the bridge and got my phone out on the internet and called Joanne. And then she said, Josh has murdered Molly. I just couldn't believe it. There was a helicopter for me on the deck within the hour. And they said, you're going home, mate. And then I got the flight to Heathrow. I've never felt so alone. By then, my son Tom was here with his fiancée Alicia. Joe was here. But no Molly.
When the police arrived at the scene of Molly McLaren's murder, Joshua Stimpson walked towards them and calmly stated, "You want me." It seemed like he was confessing to the crime. However, it quickly became clear that he had no intention of accepting responsibility for his actions.
He didn't show any remorse. He wanted people to feel sorry for him. He wanted everyone to believe that he was mentally ill, he was unwell, and he needed help.
On the 29th of June 2017, Joshua Stimpson violently stabbed his ex-girlfriend, Molly McLaren, to death in a car park in broad daylight, surrounded by busy shoppers. The police were quickly on the scene, and Stimpson, knowing the murder had been witnessed, handed himself in.
The police arrived on the scene very quickly, and they tried to help Molly, but they knew that there was nothing that they could do for her. Joshua, he'd actually started to clean up some of the blood himself from the dashboard, and he was completely emotionless. So the police seized the weapons, the 2 knives and the pickaxe. They arrested Joshua and they took him into custody. This shocked the community to the core. It was horrifying, a particularly cruel and violent murder, and it took place in broad daylight, somewhere that people walk through on a daily basis, you know, by someone that she trusted. It rocked everyone's sense of safety in their local community to think that someone capable of this was walking around, going about his daily life this whole time, and he was able to do something like this. It makes you wonder who's really out there and who's in your community.
What should have been a straightforward police investigation, though, was complicated by Stimpson's line of defence and his response to questioning. He maintained that he simply couldn't remember a thing.
If somebody says they can't remember when you're interviewing them, obviously it presents some challenges for the interviewing officers. Now, they're not medically qualified to say whether or not he could or could not remember. But there are some basic questions you could ask that individual that would perhaps show almost a level of convenience about when he lost his memory. Can he remember going to the shop that morning? Can he remember getting some petrol for his car? Can he remember going to the gym? If the answer to that is yes, and then you then say, and can you remember stabbing Molly 75 times, and the answer is no, then there's some real suspicion around the convenience of that memory loss, I would suggest.
He just said that he had thoughts of harming Molly up to at least the day before it happened. Other than that, he didn't really cooperate. He said that he couldn't remember anything from the day.
It was an assassination. It was pre-planned. He'd bought the knife. There was footage of him in Asda somewhere or other, buying the knife. So she didn't have a chance.
He didn't show any remorse for his actions or any concern to Molly's family. He wanted people to feel sorry for him. He wanted everyone to believe that he was mentally ill, he was unwell, and he needed help. He didn't know what he was doing, and he just briefly lost control, and that he wasn't someone that would normally have done this. But it was very clear that he was dangerous.
The evidence against Stimpson was overwhelming. Although he refused to talk, the police were able to charge him with the murder of Molly McLaren on the 30th of June 2017. But when it came to his court proceedings in January the following year, Stimpson claimed he wasn't in control of his actions. This line of defence meant that Molly's family would be subjected to the agony of a trial.
One of the partial psychiatric defences is diminished responsibility. So that takes murder down to manslaughter, which often has a lighter sentence. And we know that Stimpson tried this. The threshold to actually achieve the defence is very high, and you need evidence from forensic psychiatrists, but many people try. Him and his defence team tried to put forward an argument that he was mentally ill and therefore should have got diminished responsibility.
On the 28th of January 2018, Joshua Stimpson's trial for the murder of Molly McLaren began at Maidstone Crown Court. Stimpson denied murder, but pleaded guilty to manslaughter.
He was assessed by 2 different psychiatrists. They both agreed that he wasn't bipolar, that he didn't have bipolar disorder. The psychiatrist for the prosecution found that Joshua knew exactly what he was doing, that he had a real issue with women, and he was described as vain, immature, and needy. The defence psychiatrist said that he might have had a personality disorder, that he would act impulsively, he had issues with self-control. But with the murder being premeditated, you know, he'd bought these weapons specifically for this purpose, and he'd sat and waited in his car. So there was no way that it was a moment of madness, that this was a premeditated murder.
Stimpson's main line of defence had been dismissed, so now he would be judged purely on the physical evidence and the history of his behaviour towards women.
The key pieces of evidence were the murder weapon, which was shown to the jury. 2 of his ex-partners also testified and talked about the way that he had treated them in their relationships, and that was very damning evidence of the kind of person that he was and how dangerous he was. It was very clear at this point that there were so many warning signs that he showed, and it could have been dealt with before it got to this point. He obviously had a history of behaving like this, and nothing was done, and he was able to just continue and do what he did.
The trial was really hard, but I was surrounded by family and some of Molly's friends every single day. Outside of the courtroom was just packed every single day.
The trial was, in some respects, quite bizarre because the family of Josh, I mean, he was in the box, obviously. His family were there. They never said a goddamn word to us. Not one word, not even a sorry.
I couldn't take my eyes off him. I just needed to look at him, I needed to make eye contact, and he just wouldn't look at me until the last day. And suddenly, I think he forgot where he was, maybe, I don't know, and I got eye contact. And those eyes were just dead. There was nothing there at all. But he showed no remorse, no. At times, he shed a couple of crocodile tears, but no one was falling for that.
The jury deliberated for just under 4 hours. not long at all, and they unanimously convicted him of murder. Stimpson didn't really react when he was found guilty of murder. He was, as he had been this whole time, which was kind of eerily emotionless, quite blank. He didn't really react at all.
Stimpson was jailed for life with a minimum term of 26 years. His was a crime that greatly affected the people of this area, and in particular the young women for whom incidents like this are occurring with frightening regularity.
As a woman of a similar age to Molly, who grew up in the same area, and as someone who's also used dating apps, it is terrifying to think that I could be in danger, that my friends could be in the same danger. It makes you wonder what you can do to keep yourself safe. We hear about this all the time, and nothing really changes. If anything, we're told to change our behaviour, not going out too late at night, being careful about what you wear, holding your keys in your fist when you're walking down your street at night. It's almost second nature, I think, to us that we're always on guard and always trying to protect ourselves and anticipate danger. But when it's someone that you love, which statistically happens all the time, you think that you can trust someone that you're dating. Do you ever really know somebody? Can you ever really trust someone not to harm you? It really shakes your sense of security and your trust in other people. There'll be a case like this will cause an outcry, rightfully. There'll be people will post about it on social media, and there'll even be protests, but ultimately nothing changes.
Despite their grief, Molly's parents and family were determined to do something in her name to ensure that their daughter and loved one would always be remembered.
Once we set up the charity, we thought, well, let's do a festival every year, because Molly loved a festival, Molly Fest, and it's the one time each year that all her family and friends can all get together to celebrate her.
It's still difficult to grieve. I don't think we've actually started the grieving process yet, because, you know, there's an empty room upstairs. All her toys are there, but no Molly. Nothing can compensate for losing your daughter like that. Nothing.
I really want to move on. Molly would want us to move on. But we just can't. We're just stuck in purgatory. It's a nightmare, living nightmare, and I just don't see it ever changing. I loved everything about Molly. I just don't think it's hard to say the one thing I loved more about Molly, because I loved every bone in her body, everything about her. But I guess her zest for life, her love of people. Yeah.